listening to yet another episode of Smash the Bug. I'm your host, Joseph Maxwell, and I am super excited to bring along a wonderful guest. His name is Jonathan Lorenzi from Corra. He's worked with many developers over the course of his career. He's going to share with us some incredible insights as far as what he has seen makes the best performers, and I'm really excited to hear what he has to say about that. But before we jump in and to hear his thoughts about this all-important subject, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, Swift Otter. So that's where we put our Smash the Bug episodes, as well as the Smash the Bug podcast on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or Stitcher or Spotify, whatever your favorite place to listen to these wonderful podcast episodes. Go make sure you're subscribed there. So without further ado, let us jump in and welcome Jonathan Lorenzi to this episode. Welcome. It's great having you here, my friend.
Hey, Joseph. Thank you very much for having me. It's always a pleasure. Hi, everybody. I hope that you will find some use to the discussion we're about to have with Joseph, and looking forward to get started. Definitely.
So maybe if you want to start out by saying what you do for Corra. I know you are really important at Corra, so just kind of set the stage, because that's where we're going to dive into, of course, those that you have worked with over the course of your really colorful career.
Well, let's start by just adjusting something you just said. Everybody is really important in a company. I mean,
that's true.
People tend to say that higher positions are more important or whatsoever, but that's definitely not the case. And we actually will dig into it a little bit later. But
sure.
As per my position, I'm director of engineering. I manage the engineers that are in the US and some in Europe. And I have been at Corra for 4.5 years now, almost 5. I started as a technical lead and grew as a manager of engineering and a little bit later as a director of engineering.
Excellent. Wow. So that's great. And I love what you brought up there, that everybody's important. And I totally agree that everybody plays a role, because if it wasn't for, call it everybody, the leadership team would not be able to survive, would cease to exist. So that's a very good point you bring up there.
Absolutely, and again, I mean, every position is hired for a specific reason, right? And
that's right.
And a company doesn't work if you remove one position, and unless you consolidate with something else. So no matter what, everybody is important.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So through the course of your career, you said you started out as a tech lead at Corra. Now you're director of engineering. You presumably you did something else in your previous career, previous places of work. So you worked with a lot of developers. You have a really well-rounded knowledge of what makes a great developer. And not only have you worked with a lot of developers, you've also interviewed probably far more, maybe 5 times as many developers as you worked with, or more. Like you've interacted with a ton of developers through the course of your career. So as those of us who are listening to this episode, I hope everyone, and I'm sure everyone, wants to be an excellent developer. We want to be irreplaceable at our company, because obviously the worst thing that could ever happen is a company handing you, what is that? It used to be a pink slip or something like that. Like that piece of paper saying, hey, you're no longer needed. We're downsizing. You're not producing enough billable revenue for us. Whatever the reason is, being irreplaceable means like you're the last person the company would ever want to let go. You're the one that they're wanting to give bonuses to. You're going to be put on the best projects. Like that's what every developer wants. So with that in mind, what traits, what have you seen in people who truly do achieve those wonderful, the best job opportunities in a company, are able to climb the ladder faster, et cetera, et cetera? What traits have you seen in those people to make that happen, that journey happen?
I think the most common traits that I can talk about is, I would say, passion. Somebody who's really passionate about what it does, he or she does, would probably become one of the best. I mean, there's no other way around. I hear people say, I'm an accountant, I'm a cashier, whatever it is that
Right.
you're doing on an everyday basis, right? But being a developer, there's something else here, right? When you're a developer, you don't stop as soon as you clock out and go back home, or leave your office if you work from home,
Right.
or your desk. You're constantly a developer. You're passionate about what you're doing, and you have to constantly learn. And again, without passion, it doesn't work. I would say that's potentially the most common traits of successful developers, and obviously motivation. But if you
Right.
if you don't have the passion, you will never have the motivation.
Well, let's talk about two aspects of that, of passion. So, number one, let's say it's development, and someone's in development. This is probably most of our listeners are. There's the Magento platform, and of course there's Shopify, and I mean there's a bazillion other e-commerce platforms out there. How does someone become passionate about? How does someone get the passion if they don't start with the passion? Do you see what I'm saying?
Again, if you start without the passion, you can discover yourself a passion, obviously, but it's always more difficult because you have to really look for it and dig, and you have to put a lot of work into it to get to that point where some people just like to build something out of nothing, right? I mean, you start with a blank page and you want to build a site. That's how I started, actually. I mean, I was already an engineer before, but when I moved to the US, my brother-in-law had a small company actually that was building websites, and he was not working on Magento or Shopify or anything. He was starting from a blank page, and he's like, okay, let's start from here. And so obviously he had to teach me everything because, like I said, I was working on a embedded software in C++, but I was actually had nothing to do with websites, so sessions and all this. Like I couldn't. I had to learn everything from scratch. So if you don't have the passion of learning everything, you'll never get anywhere. I mean, you're going to be able to be I would say a junior PHP developer at best. But if you want to become a senior, a lead, a manager, or whatever, you have to really get into it. Okay. So starting with the passion is always easier. Now, actually, if you don't start with the passion, you can always be a good developer, but you will have more difficulties really reaching the highest position. And I don't mean manager, because not everybody can or wants to be a manager. I mean,
and that's a good distinction.
A senior or lead, right? Because again, everybody thinks they want to become a manager, but dealing with other people is not always what you really want to do. So anyway, starting with the passion is always easier. You can get it, but you would have to put a lot more work to really get to that point. And it's only when you get to that point that you will reach higher levels.
Here's another follow-on to that. I think in a lot of people's minds, the word passion is correlated with the number of hours one works. So, i.e., the people who are passionate are working, like the really passionate people are working, for example, I'm throwing out a number here, 20 hours a day, but the people who are not passionate maybe work 8 hours a day. That kind of gets into the work-life balance thing. So how would you push back on somebody like that? I mean, do you think is it true that passion is shown by the number of hours that one works, or is there other ways that passion kind of infuses itself into somebody's output?
Well, that's the thing, though. If you're really passionate about what you're doing, it's not really considered work, right? Yeah. And that's very important to remember. Of course, you're going to work for a company. You have to get some income. But if you're a developer and you're passionate about what you're doing, you're going to stop working for that company. You're going to do your own project on the side. You're going to start reading about the new technologies, about the new languages that are coming out, new frameworks. I mean, it's a constant... it's constant, I would say, research and reading and trying and building, right? So the word work, in my opinion, is kind of not completely accurate, because you put yourself into your passion, and it's the same for any passion. If you think about somebody who's passionate about being a soccer player, they don't count how many hours they spend behind kicking the ball. I mean, it's just that's just what they do. They're gonna play all the time. It's the same with developers. You're behind a computer and you build things.
That's good.
So I would say it's not really about I wouldn't say that somebody that works 20 hours a day for their company makes them passionate. That's not what it is. That potentially means that they really want to make the company better. They're really involved in the company. They love what they're doing, but that doesn't mean they're passionate about development. That can mean they're passionate about the company and they want to help. They want to build more. But that's not. It's not a one-on-one match, pretty much.
Good. That's very interesting. I like your take on that. That's excellent. So we talked about passion being one of the most important aspects, and just basically like it kind of infuses who we are. We are a developer. We are passionate about becoming a better developer. We're reading stuff. We're subscribing to, well, like there's the PHP Architect magazine. I mean, we're looking to broaden our knowledge in every way possible as far as how we can become a better developer. And absolutely, that totally works. Would you say that there's any other distinctions between somebody who's just a decent developer, and there's nothing wrong with being, when I say a decent developer, versus somebody who really is on a track to somebody who is irreplaceable? And again, just to put it in context, in my opinion, like a decent developer, that's good, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It just means that they have other priorities. Maybe it's family life or other things that are going on, and that's nothing wrong with that. In fact, in some cases, that could be good. But as far as depending on one's career, one's personal goals and priorities, if one truly wants to become irreplaceable at a company, you have to be passionate, and that's so important.
Yes, and just to go back to what you were just mentioning right now, it's I'm not hiring only people that are purely passionate and spend 20 hours behind a computer for me or not. Obviously, having a family, having a work-life balance is incredibly important. It's just about what you decide to do. But I can tell you that the people that will learn the more, that will become more successful, tend to spend a lot more time behind the computer. And that's just naturally what everything is about. I mean, the more you spend time on something, the better you get.
Right.
But again, if you entirely happy being a senior developer or even a technical lead, but not growing into the role and learning new technologies because you want to spend some more time with your family, of course it's totally fine.
Yeah.
But something that's very important to understand is that motivation is also extremely important, and that having a passion and not being motivated to learn more, that's kind of the tricky zone. And I can give you an example, because we talked about interviews that I ran in the past and how many people and etc.
A lot of interviews.
This is perfect example that I want to mention that actually that happened. Perfect case. And if you're watching, Jerry, I'm talking about you. I know he's subscribed to the channel. That's why I'm actually pointing that. So this guy that I interviewed, I think it was 3.5 years ago now. He was applying for a technical lead position, or I had a senior dev and technical lead position at the time, and he was a very nice guy, very motivated. He really wanted to work at Corra, but he just didn't have the skill set at the time. It wasn't. He didn't have the knowledge that we required for the position. He was very good in what he was doing, but he needed a little bit more to be able to get the position. And because he was motivated, because he was a great guy, I told him, look, if you want to grow, you need to work on this, you need to learn this and that, and really push yourself to grow in those areas.
Yes.
And he actually did, and reapplied 2 years later, and I hired him, and he's a great performer. He's a fantastic senior developer. I know the clients love him. The technical leads that work with him love him, because he knows what he's talking about, and because he was so motivated that he had one goal. He wanted to work at Corra and really grow into Magento, and he did.
That's awesome.
So working towards goals is also very important. Remember to always reset goals, because otherwise you're gonna hit a plateau.
Yep.
But and I would say, do not reset a goal when you reach it. You need to reset a goal before you do, because what motivates people is to reach higher. So if your goal is to, I don't know, be certified, have all the certifications in Magento, well, before you reach the last two, you should potentially try to think about another goal, so that when you reach the last two, you already started working on the next goal.
That's great. And I love that. And I think in my I've interviewed far fewer people than you have, but you can literally, at least in my experience, I can literally tell someone's passion level and or motivation. I don't know. I'm guessing in the first 5 or 10 minutes or less of an interview. Like it's
maximum 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's you can pick up on it very quickly. How much is somebody into this? And what I really appreciated, like what you just said there, this person did not have the call it the skills yet, but boy, did they have the motivation. They had the passion to go along with it, and the skills really are the easy part to add into that. And once you get that final ingredient there, of course you hired him. And I think any other recruiter or people who are also hiring, I mean, that's what you're looking for is because again, skills are easy to grow, skills are easy comparatively to add, and that's again why I talked about in the first part of this, the first almost not quite half, first sort of the book, the art of e-commerce debugging, is about that whole attitude. How do we approach problems? Because
the
mindset, exactly. Because if we approach problems with the idea of, well, we're just going to pass it on to our tech lead or something, senior developer on the team, that's not a way to win friends. Let's just put it that way.
And let me bounce back on what you just mentioned here. I mean, you just released a fantastic book. Let's talk about it a minute. I know you didn't have that in mind, and I know although it's important for you, you just released a fantastic book. Whoever is watching this, any kind of skill set of level of developers you are, this book is going to help you, right? And this is part of what I'm saying. If you're motivated, if you're really passionate about what you're doing, you need to look at the best resources. And one of them just came out, right? So having this is extremely important because you will learn some things that you didn't know before. I mean, most of the people that watch this podcast or subscribe to your YouTube channel know about Vinaycop, right? I mean, it's probably one of the best, if not the best Magento developers I've met in my entire career. Yeah. And himself added a quote to your book saying that he learned stuff in your book, right? So there's no level of skill set you can have to really that would stop you from learning something with that book.
That was humbling to hear that.
It applies to Magento. It applies to some other development platforms you're working on. It's general, right? So that's part of what I'm saying. Like when there's a new resource that comes out, subscribe to it, buy the book, read the channels. I mean, read the blog, look at the videos on YouTube. All of this is what's going to make you really on top of what you know, of what you're doing.
Thank you for that comment there. It was really humbling, honestly, to get that comment from Vina. I was like, oh wow. I mean, like, he of all people, he would have said, "Yep, great book," and that's about it. But the fact that it actually, I was blown away. But that's good, and I appreciate that. That is my absolute goal, is to help developers become truly great and excellent developers. And again, that's why I love having people like you on this podcast, because I've talked with what I feel like a lot of people and done quite a few interviews, but you bring a whole nother scope of interviews and conversations to the table, and it's really, really valuable to be hearing this in every single way possible. We have to get our butts in motion and to be passionate, to be excited about that. Even though, he's like, why get excited about Magento or whatever the platform is? It's that path, if nothing else, is our ability to become excited or passionate or motivated about something that could be actually one of the greatest skills we could ever learn, is that ability to get ourselves in gear, as opposed to just saying, well, there's nothing exciting or, there's nothing flashy about Magento. I mean, I guess some people would argue with that point, but and if you boil it down, it's an e-commerce platform built on the PHP platform or PHP language. I mean, it's for me, what really gets me excited though is it's the community. I love the community, people like you in the community. It makes me want to give back more and to have those conversations, and the learning that I have received, call it the training, informal trainings, just phenomenal. So there are many reasons.
The community is fantastic, and again, I mean, the platform is very flexible. You can add to it, you can modify, there's the kind of things that we want to do. I mean, I know it's not ideal for the merchants, not always. Right. Some of them don't want the developers to mess around with the platform, and some of them do. But again, it has pros and cons, like every other platform.
It does.
Yeah. To get back to one point that you mentioned, that you want to help, and then yeah, I think it's important to remember also that we always learn from anything at any time. And you mentioned that I have many interviews under my belt. Yes, I do. But we always have, so when somebody is hired, or sometimes not even when they're not hired, our HR departments reaches out to give feedback and hears all the feedback. And when there's
That's
when there's
awesome.
something
Yeah.
that can be brought to me, they do. Because it's important for me to also make sure that the candidate is comfortable. Everybody needs to remember at the end of the day, I mean, I'm like anybody that I interview, right? I mean, I'm not different except that I'm looking for help, pretty much. Think
Right.
about it this way. I'm looking for help and you're applying to help me, right?
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, I have people that apply that are very uncomfortable during the interviews, and I'm trying to make them feel comfortable because yes, I need to know if they have the level of knowledge that I require for this position, but at the end of the day, they have that. They're not Nothing is going to change during the interview, right? So when you go to an interview, you're confident about what you know, and if you're not the person, you're not the person. It's not the end of the world. I mean, there's going to be a company that's going to be better suited for you. It's
That's
very
right.
important to remember that if it works, it's good. If it doesn't, move along. There's more to it, right? And especially in Magento at the moment, I don't know anybody that really stays on the market for a long time. I
No, no.
mean, it's very difficult to find new people, and most of the time, it's people that already have a job. It's very
Yeah.
rare that I interview somebody that tells me, "Well, I'm unemployed for 4 months now." I mean, it used to happen at the beginning, but it doesn't happen anymore. Right now,
Oh,
it's just
yeah.
people that are unhappy where they are. They want to grow into agency because they want to have a different skill set. I mean, if you work for a retailer, you're going to work on many different areas, but of that specific site. If you work for an agency, you're gonna see a lot more sites, a lot more builds, and then you're gonna be exposed to more, pretty much.
That's right.
So it's something that people are looking for. So that's the kind of candidates that I get, but it doesn't change the fact that it's not for everything, and again, it's not the end of the world if you're not taken at an interview. So everybody
Yeah.
needs to come pretty relaxed to an interview, knowing what they know, and move with it.
I love that. Yeah. And I totally agree. Like there is so much demand for Magento developers right now that at the end of the day, you're going to have a job in one way or another. And I think the other perspective as well to have when coming out of an interview is, like you said, you mentioned, is you're going to give feedback. It's not just, yeah, pass, fail, okay, you're done. Like you give the feedback, which ultimately, if the candidate wants, they will take and they will implement that feedback because ultimately, at the end of the day, it just might be that they haven't worked on projects that involve that specific domain of knowledge that maybe was lacking. So they can go brush up on that, and maybe in a year or two, like you mentioned, this other person, they'll be able to come back and
Absolutely.
and work
Absolutely.
for you.
So it's also important that yeah, it's that every interview I try to give the feedback. There's not always a bad feedback, right? And let's be honest. At the end of the day, when we post a job opportunity, maybe we have 10 candidates, and maybe 5 of them are fantastic, but at the end I have to make a choice because I need only one, right? So
That's right.
maybe I have very good people, and at the end there's just one that is a little bit better, and he's going to be the one that I end up hiring. That doesn't mean that the other one failed, right? It's like running a race, 100 meters, right? I mean, you can beat the world record. If somebody beats you that day, well, you
That's
still
right.
don't get it.
Yeah.
So
It's a
it's
very
very
good
important
example
to
here.
remember that. It's
Yeah.
very important to remember that it's not always about the skill set, and we don't always have feedback for you to improve because of that. If I do have feedback, I will usually give it to the candidates so that they can actually get better, because it is a small world, and maybe that candidate is going to work on some things and come back later with better skill sets. Or maybe in the future, I'll be looking for a job where that person will be a director, and I'll be happy to actually end
Yeah.
it in the discussion in good terms, right? So
That's right. That's right. That's right. One quick question before it looks like we're gonna be wrapping up on time here. But one final thing, and this is not on our conversation, our questions that we talked about. I was gonna ask you, what would you say if you were to give a candidate advice going into an interview? And I think, well, you already mentioned just be comfortable. It's not like the knowledge that you have is really going to change somebody's opinion. Like it's either going to be a pass, call it a pass or fail. Not really, but like you're going to know the interviewers to try and determine where you're at as far as your knowledge, your fit, etc. And they're going to rank that and choose probably the best fit. So, but going into an interview, what would you say are the things that, giving that advice, hey, you should do X, Y, and Z, and this is going to give you the very best chance of getting that job?
Well, I mean, as you already mentioned, I already talked about this, but making sure that you don't really get to an interview with a lot of stress. And I know it's easier to say than it's easier said than done, but the more you stress, the more you're going to forget what you already know. And at the end of the day, think about it as you have a task that's being asked of you. I mean, you have a request on something, on a plugin or whatever, and you need to build it. Do you know? Do you not know? And that's what it is. I personally, and I know I'm one of the few. I personally don't mind if you're behind a computer when you actually when I'm interviewing, just because when we actually going to talk to clients, where we're actually going to develop something, we're going to have computers in front of us, right? It's important to make sure that you don't Google everything, that you know how to look for things, right? So if I ask a question, for example, about the framework, about Magento itself, look into Magento and tell me, I don't know the answer, but this is where I'm going to look, right?
That's right.
And you look at the same time, and you come up with the answer. That's something that I absolutely don't mind, because at the end of the day, we can't remember everything and anything that that is in the framework. So, but again, Google is not the source for that, because you're gonna come up with some wrong answers that come up from somebody that didn't know what he was talking about and stuck on the flow, and that's not gonna help you. But the other thing is that what I want to know is, do you have the logic behind it, right? I mean, when you answer a question, just don't tell me. I mean, if I ask you what plugins are, just don't tell me before, around, after.
Yeah, there you go.
I don't care about that.
Yeah.
I want you to explain to me what they are, but exactly like why you would use them, and then how you would use them, how you would implement it, and what is the benefit of doing so. So that I really know, that I really can see that you know what you're talking about. And again, the more that coming back to what we discussed earlier, the more you're passionate about something, the more you're going to want to talk about it anyway. That's also something that's going to be noticeable.
Wow, that's good.
So yeah, so that's pretty much what it is. Come relaxed. There's nothing that I'm going to ask that is completely crazy, and I would expect the same from anybody in this industry. You need to make sure that, and I'm talking now to everybody that is recruiting, don't ask questions that would never be asked to that person. Right? If you're gonna put somebody on a project on Magento, and you're like, well, how would you do this in Shopify? Who cares? That's not what I'm hiring you for, right?
Yeah.
Now the other thing that's important is that, based on the position, it's not just about one topic. It's not just about Magento. For example, if I'm hiring a technical lead, my technical leads, and I assume every technical leads in agencies, are actually client facing, right? So they're pretty much the technical resource that the client is going to rely on. What does that mean? That means that they're not going to ask only Magento question. They're going to come up with, well, what do I need to do for my hosting? What do I need to do for my CDN? Like, how would I handle this? And then why is this not caching properly? Like, how would you debug that? So you need to know pretty much everything around Magento and how things are working, and not just around Magento, around, I would say, web requests, right? How are things tied up? And if it's not working, like, how would you debug that? So it's based on the position. It's not always just about Magento. Read the job description before you apply, and sometimes try to reach out. I mean, people are usually available on LinkedIn or on Slack, the Magento community Slack, or your own Slack, actually. I mean, there are multiple platforms where you can reach out to sometimes somebody from that company and ask pretty much more details about what the position is about, so you can already know if you
that's a good one.
Qualified.
Yes, absolutely. That's so good. And even just like, yeah, there's a whole bunch. Just reaching out, initiating a conversation with somebody who works at the company.
Mm-hmm.
What's this job about? What's the interview process like? I mean, there's a lot that one can do, I think, to help. And ultimately, I think coming into an interview prepared, as far as even having a little bit of background, I've heard stories about people coming in and saying, "So what really do you guys do?" Like, that's just not a good question to ask. I mean, maybe there's ways to ask that question, but in that format, it's probably not a good way to ask that question.
Absolutely. Because what's important also is, and you just pointed it out, come up with some questions, right? Think about it this way. Think about it this way. If I interview you, you're going to have other interviews potentially because you're looking for a job. You're going to have other interviews. If myself and another company are going to come up with the exact same offer, what would make you decide which company you're going to? And if you don't have the answer, that's a problem. You need to know what would make you choose Corra over somebody else, right? Is it the culture? Is it the benefits? Is it? It's not just always about a number, right? There's more to it than just the salary phase.
Well, and I think it comes back to asking those questions. I've had interviews on both sides of this. Asking questions first conveys that this job is actually going to be important. Like, you really want to make sure that this is a good fit. Like, I would want to make sure that this is a good fit for me, as well as, so that I'm making a good decision. Again, like you say, if these offers come back identical, that I'm going to be in a good position. And the other thing is, those questions, I think, convey interest. It's not like you're desperate for this job. Like, if you were desperate, you'd say, yeah, just give me the job. Just give me the job. Versus like, well, is this, again, it comes back to, is this a good fit? Is it really a good thing for me? Versus I think not asking questions about the company, in my opinion, comes off making the candidate seem more desperate. I shouldn't use the word just desperate itself, but I think it makes one think that they want a job as opposed to the right job. Where they
I think it's important to, if you don't have questions about the company, that's fine. But you need to, as you said earlier, show that you know the company already. You don't have questions because you already know the company. Yes, I know Corra, you guys worked on this, you did this, I saw you at Magento or whatever it is, but show that you already know the company, and this is why you don't have questions. Not because you don't care, because you already did some things, right? You already did some research. But usually, if you really did some research, you always have some questions, because you're gonna want to know, I mean, what your day-to-day looks like, because it's like I said, the technical lead in one company is different than the technical lead in another, right? So
for sure,
what is it going to look like? What is the size of the team? What are the growth, like potential career growth that can apply to this position, right? So there are going to be follow-up questions anyway.
That's good. Wow. Jonathan, I think I see our time is up. We got to wrap it up. And you have been sitting in what you told me in a warm office in California. You turned off the air conditioner graciously for us so that we didn't have this loud jet engine in the back. And I appreciate that. But I'm not seeing these beads of sweat falling down your forehead. So maybe that means it hasn't happened yet.
I try to keep it cool.
Okay, good. That's great.
Thank you for your time, Joseph. I really appreciate it. And good luck to anybody that's looking for a job. And if you talk to me in the future, like I said, relax. It's just a conversation, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, never mind.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. Great advice, Jonathan. Thank you. Well, what a pleasure it was having Jonathan on this podcast here today. I hope that it provides good insight as far as really acing an interview and then going on to being and becoming an irreplaceable, phenomenal developer at whatever company you're working at. So whether you already have a job, become that irreplaceable developer, that rock star great developer. If you're looking for a job to switch things up, make sure you have your ducks in a row that you are going to ace that interview if it is the right company. And again, that's one thing he pointed out, and it's a really good thing. Just because you sit for an interview does not mean that is the company that you want to work for. There could be 5 other companies, and one of those might be many times better to work for. It's just how it is. So thank you for listening. It was a pleasure having you on. Look forward to more content, great content like this in the future.